we've only got so much attention. Like our attention span is limited. And for me, that all comes down to your focus and attention. We have too many distractions. So if you're trying to remember everything, what you're creating is a distraction list in your head. That is not going to help.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm a big fan of take stuff out of your head. But the reality is, if you will know that stuff over time, what you know, you just end up knowing.
What is up, guys? We've got Mark Channon as a guest on the podcast today. So Mark is a Grandmaster memory champion. So if you're anything like me, and you forget people's names very often, you forget things that need to be done, I really, really recommend this episode. I've got lots of actionable tips. You can see me and Arthur live testing out our memory skills. I would say that we did have a bit of an audio issue on my end, but in the theme of this podcast and theme of how we like to recommend running your business, if it's good enough, then just get it out there. So apologies for the audio, but you'll definitely be able to get the gist of the episode. Take care. Bye.
But I haven't actually spoken much to Arthur about you purposely, because I kind of wanted this, because I'm a little bit intrigued. I remember the first time, because Mark did some business coaching with me, and it was maybe the first or second call. I did some research about you, your memory background. I remember having this one meeting, and I just went on this really long spiel about this is happening, and this is happening in the business, and this, and I'm just not sure here. And I stopped, and you just literally just recited everything I had said, and I was like, "Oh fuck, this is that is not normal. I've never come across somebody that." And it was not only like you recited; it was the order you recited it in, and you just took out all the fluff. And I was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." But also, that sticks with me, So yeah, that's my personal introduction to you, Mark. But
And to be fair, that's one of my go-to strategies. It's probably where I get the most value as a coach, because that is day in, day out, whether it's 5 sessions, 10 sessions a day, however many sessions I'm running. I don't know what your experience was of that then, but I often see that more than anything, me remembering stuff is like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But people feel heard. I don't know if that was your experience, but you go, oh, he's really listening to what I've said here, and he's understood.
I mean, there was a little bit of, because I knew you had a background in, memory, I almost expected it to be better than a normal person. But, there was certainly this element of, okay, you're actually listening to me, and you're not just waiting for me to stop talking so you can say the sort of next thing. And that's really powerful, right? As a client, to be heard like that, and I think particularly for builders, which is why we kind of wanted to get you on this, is to talk about how we can apply those sorts of principles and making a client feel heard, making your team feel heard. There's loads of people in your kind of world and your builder that you talk to with so much information, but Can we step back a little bit and just give us a bit of background on the whole Grandmaster of Memory, because this intrigues me.
Crazy title.
Yeah. How do you become one, and how do you even get good at memory, or were you always good at memory?
No, and that's where, I mean, if I go back to the beginning, this is over 30 years now. When we go back to about 1992, because that's actually when I get introduced to it. But I had a reputation. When I say this now, people sometimes don't believe me, but I had a reputation of having the worst memory. Like, people would make jokes about me and they make fun of it. And I was an actor. So actually I was pretty good at lines, but everything else, rubbish, like not good at all. And really my main problem was not memory per se. It was focus and it was attention. I didn't discover this out probably years later, to be honest. But the way I got into it is I was actually kipping on a couch a mate of mine on the Isle of Dogs, and his name was Steve, and he was very energetic, and he was always getting into new things. And he burst into the room one day, and he just said, "Mark, remember these 20 items?" I thought, oh, here we go. And I did about 4, and then he shared a technique. It was something called a memory palace. A lot of people are kind of familiar with this stuff now. And I remembered all 20 words, like forwards and backwards. And it blew my mind. Like, I'd never experienced anything like this before. And he said, "What's number 15?" I was like, "Space shuttle." I was like, "How did I do this?" But that wasn't the best part. I woke up the next day, they were still in my head. They had stuck. The next week, they were still in my head. A month later, I couldn't forget these things. And so I just went full in. I did a memory course. Was it Evan Trudeau Mega Memory? It's like one of these American memory courses, right? But I jumped into it and I thought, actually, it looks like there's some value in here. Long story short, that led me to a year later. I was working in a show called Crazy for You because I was an actor. I was in the West End, and my agent called me up, and she went, "Mark, you got any ideas for a game show?" At random. I was always having ideas, right? Most of them didn't work, but some of them got some traction. And I said, "Give me half an hour." And I wrote a show, A4 paper, blank, pencil. I mean, it was really unprofessional, right? And I just posted it because it was prior to the internet, really. And the head of this production company, Stephen Leahy at Action Time, said, "Pitch it to me." I pitched it. Long story short, I got picked up. So in 1995, there was a show called Monkhouse's Memory Masters on telly. It was 8 million people. It was my show. Like, I created that. And no one remembers it now. Do you remember it? Monkhouse's Memory Masters?
I actually remember this name. I remember the name of this show. I don't know if I watched it, but I definitely remember the name of this show.
I watched the pilot on YouTube when I was looking. I think you uploaded it, or I've seen a pilot of it on.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. It's pretty
I had
cool
lots of hair.
It looked really different.
Yeah. Well, that got me into it, you see. And then you might have heard of Tony Bazan. So Tony Bazan, the late Tony Bazan, he was the originator of mind maps, and he'd written over 100 books on memory. So I got chatting to Tony, and he said, "Listen, you should compete in the World Memory Championships." And this was the same year my show was out. And I thought, what is this? And then he described it. And you got this event where you're memorizing things like 2,000 digits in an hour, try and do 100 words in 5 minutes, packs of cards, poetry, all these kind of things. Now, initially, I thought it's not something I want to do. But I thought I have to. I can't be doing this stuff and not do it myself. And I thought I'll give it a go. And I trained for 3 months, 4 to 6 hours a day. It was intense, but I ended up getting ranked as one of the first ever Grandmasters of Memory. And to do that, you have to score a certain number of events. And I was ranked 3rd in the world as a Grandmaster. So that kind of kicked it off. But it was kind of the end of the competition world for me, because what I was much more interested in was, okay, the game show was fun. And I could see that it was working for people. The competition was, useful in terms of what we're capable of. But I thought, how can we use it in real life? And that was the turning point for me. And for the next 3 years, I set up a company. I went around the country and I just trained people. And people started to mail me back again before email, right? And I was getting these letters from people saying, "Wow, I've just passed this exam for acupuncture. I've left the corporate world. I've set up my own business and I failed it previously and now I've passed with 100%. Other people saying, "I feel confident that I can do anything I want to do now." They're in their 40s. I had a mum, Hermione, and she said, "My kids are coming to me for homework. My husband's looking at me in a different way. This has never happened to me before." And so that was it. And that was I guess, the origin story of how I got into all of this stuff and why I still continue to do it today. And it's kind of taken different forms over the years.
Is there like a significant difference? Because you talked about this transition away from competitive memory to, I guess, what you're saying, real world applicable memory. But is the technique that much different, or is it just you just wanted to apply the same technique but just in a different?
Yeah. So I guess when I think about memory, I'm quite holistic in my approach to memory and learning. There are specific strategies you'll use in competition, memory palaces. We can give a demo of that in a bit. Chain methods and stories, and there's various systems. And so those systems you can absolutely apply in the real world. Most people experience a chasm, a gap from let's say, doing a shopping list or memorizing a pack of cards to how do I use this to remember a conversation? How do I use this to build expertise? How do I use this to memorize sales data, client data, stats data? There's a bit of a leap there. Now, if you're a memory competitor, you'll be able to bridge that gap. But for most people, it's a big challenge. And also in real life, like we can have a conversation for 30 minutes, an hour, and there might be 10 key things that are the main points of that conversation. And so in competition, you might have a minute to do like 20 things, and so in reality, you don't really need to be able to do that in the real world. Sometimes you've got some time to prep, and the stuff that you do on the fly, usually there's just more time there. So you don't need to be at a level of a memory competitor to get value from it. But the challenge that most people experience is they don't know how to jump from here to here. And that's really what I help with. And I go beyond memory strategies, and I really go into other aspects of attention and focus and comprehension and understanding and habits. And as a whole, like I say, I'm very holistic when it comes to learning and memory, because a lot of behavior design falls into this as well.
And it's I know you've got memory school, which I think is where this is all coming together and where you teach this. But where you've got, so what I experienced when I talked to you, I feel like it was that ability to listen and remember at the same time. Is that different to just being able to remember like a list of things, not like crazy, like 2,000 numbers, or is it just an extension to that? So is it first you deal with just how do you just remember a list without other information coming in, and then once you've mastered that, then you master kind of remembering plus processing information that's coming in?
Yes, that's a good question. So there's one technique you'll use for, let's say, memorizing a list, and you will still use that technique when it comes to, let's say, memorizing the main points of a conversation. It will be in there. But when it comes to remembering what's been said, I actually start with your state. Becoming present and letting go of trying to remember anything. And getting curious, because when you prime yourself to be curious, you naturally remember more. When you let go of trying to remember, there's no tension. And so you naturally remember more. And then what you really want to do is think about, what's this person really saying? And so I talk about priming a lot. There's a lot of priming. I call this strategy creative listening. And you're really looking at strategies like active listening and then deep listening when you're thinking about what's the intention behind this. Or they're saying something. I'm getting an instinct. I'm thinking there's something they're not sharing. And when you listen on that level, you just naturally remember. Now, if you sprinkle on top a little bit of this magic sauce, which is memory techniques, that then allows you to go boom, 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 boom. There's 10 things. Let me play them back to you. Is that right? And you go, yeah, wow. You heard me. But you start with the act of deep listening first, and curiosity and attention, and then you kind of sprinkle the stuff on top. And if you combine that stuff, it becomes pretty powerful.
With builders and guys, especially that's still maybe site-based, still quite heavily on site, it can be quite intense, and it's easier said than done to relax and like just being zen. Yeah. Have you got any suggestions? Because that sounds like that's like a fundamental precursor to anything else, which you need to stop trying to actively like try and remember and just relax and be in flow. But is there any sort of tips you can give or suggestion of that as a thing, a technique that you can implement?
And look, there's a lot of strategies you can do to manage anxiety and stress in a situation. However, if I was just to share one, and this is something I do normally just in regular coaching, if you find you're in intense situations, high pressure situations, the worst thing you can do for anxiety is to think about you. The best thing you can do is to get outside of your head and get into the other person's head. What's the reason they're actually saying this? What do they really need right now? What are they missing? Is there a way that I can help them fill the gap of what they're missing? Because then there's the emotion of the situation gets discharged. Like you have a higher level of certainty and control. And in that situation, you'll now remember more. To be honest, in a lot of situations, you've now got a higher level of influence over that situation because you have a higher level of influence over yourself. So it's, you know, that idea, get outside your own head, you know, leave your agenda, if even for a moment, on the table while you hear, and then you can stick your agenda back on and go, okay, this is what I've heard. What are our options? And then you can start asking those questions. And, you know, if you're doing that role, it's liable. I'd imagine you got a skill set there that allows you to do that role, right? But I don't know what your take on that, but I find that idea, that mindset, get outside of your head. You know, don't take it personally. You know, leave your agenda. Emotionally, you just have a much higher level of control.
I guess I always thought so. I'm sure you hear all the time people say, "Oh, I'm crap at remembering." And my wife actually, of all people, pointed out that I'm selective and shit at remembering things. And I always thought that was it. It's like things that I don't. I've got to be careful what I say because usually I forget things about like my son and stuff like that. But it's things that I'm not maybe naturally inclined to like do or think about. I forget, but things particularly like the business, or if I'm, you know, someone's relying on something from me, or I'm relying on someone I'm pretty on top of and remember. So I always thought it was like the stuff you care about, you remember, and stuff you just like don't care about, you just don't remember. But it sounds like actually there's more to it than that.
Yeah, and just because, let's say, you don't remember something about your son or your wife doesn't mean you don't care about them, right? But it might mean that today, in this moment or this week, your focus is elsewhere. And where your focus goes, that's the stuff that you're going to remember. That's essentially how priming works. If you're paying attention to a certain thing and you're primed around that, and when you're primed, this is actually an unconscious type of implicit memory. When you're primed, your brain goes, hey, this is important to you. You naturally remember it. It impacts the decisions that you make and then the actions that you take. And so it might just be that right now in the moment, your priority is doing this thing. Now, maybe the reason you're doing that thing is actually for your family, right? There's a bigger picture there. And we are all selective in terms of what we remember, in the sense that what we pay attention to, what we're interested in, that's what we're selecting to remember. And a lot of the other stuff, well, maybe is boring, or maybe we don't understand it, or maybe we're just not interested, so we don't remember it. The problem is when that stuff is stuff we have to do. We have to remember. Okay, now we need a strategy.
I was I just wanted to ask about this, like, because I feel like you work mostly with adults, right? I've worked with kids before. I used to be a teacher, so I think there's often this link between memory and intelligence, and kids can get pigeonholed, and then they start feeling themselves that, well, I'm not smart. I don't remember stuff because I'm not smart. And definitely, I think a lot of those guys that go into construction, because I can think of 5 friends of mine who I thought were intelligent, but they didn't do well in school because they didn't have a good memory. How do you find that those people kind of like pigeonhole themselves by the time they get to, you know, adulthood, and they're like, no, my memory's shit. I can't remember stuff. Like, I'm not even going to bother. And how do you get over that? Because there must be some sort of like emotional, psychological element to it.
Yeah, belief's massive. What you believe in yourself, again, it kind of primes you and you act in a certain way. I guess there's a few parts to this. And so actually, I spent 10 years around school, so I did like these study skills things. And what I always find is that the first most important thing, because I had a day with a group of teenagers, right, was just one, you got to connect in some way, but it's the interest you got to spark off. So I'd always play a game show first to get people interested. And then what you're describing there, I'd actually look out for those, let's say, kids in the class who thought, I'm no good. And then I'd work with them. And you'd often see a little transformation. They go, wow, I didn't believe I could do that. And they do something, they remember something, like, it changes the game. That happens as we go older. And the problem is, as we get older, we take it with us, right? Oh, I'm not smart. I mean, I actually failed all my mock GCSE exams or O grades in Scotland initially, failed all my mocks, like all of them. And then the only reason I passed was because I made a bet with my parents. I was 15. I said, listen, I want to get out of Aberdeen. I mean, I love Aberdeen now. Let's go back there. But as a kid, I was like, I got to get out, right? And I said, listen, and they said, listen, you pass your exams, you can go to college. I mean, I didn't even I was acting college, right? There was no guarantee I'd even get in. But I was like, and my motivation skyrocketed. And I started to find, unbeknown to me, some little hacks I could do to stick stuff in my head. And, you know, it wasn't like I went by with A's, right? I scraped by, I did that stuff. But then it was the first moment I thought, oh, actually, this is kind of doable. But you see it when you work with people and what you're saying about people's beliefs. A lot of the adults I work with, they will absolutely say my memory is shit or is crap or I can't do it. And now it becomes who they are. It becomes part of their identity. And therefore it can it can get in the way of certain choices that they might otherwise make. Yeah. But here's the thing, once you shift it, I work with, she was 64, Jill, her name was, and she'd failed the California bar exam. And this is one of the toughest exams in the world, right? And when I worked with her, she already knew memory techniques, and I kind of worked with her to kind of dial it up, but I realized that wasn't a problem for Jill. She didn't believe she could. She didn't believe it was possible for her. I'm too old. I haven't done this kind of stuff in years. Who am I to think I could do this? I'm not smart enough. I'm not clever enough. I'm not intelligent enough. When we worked on the beliefs, in the same time worked on showing, like demonstrating how good her memory actually was, changed the game. And it was amazing. I mean, everything went wrong when she did the exam. The electricity went out. Everyone was panicking except Joe. Joe did it. She passed. She was one of like a small group that passed that year. So, but I see that all the time. That is very, very regular. And you can't tell people it's, hey, no, you're smart, right? You have to take them on a little journey there. And they have to come to that conclusion on their own and give them some realization, but also awareness that, you know, all that crap at school that they told you, it's all junk. It's not a reality. You know, our brain is amazing that it's fluid and it can change. And it doesn't matter what, you know, where you come from, what your background is, what you do today, everyone has the ability to learn. And that's what I've discovered over the years.
So you don't find, or do you find that age makes a difference when you're working with people? I know you work predominantly with adults, but adults of a certain age, or is it actually is the belief an instinct factor as we get older that they generally have more of a lack of belief that they can do it?
Age has an impact, right? Because as we get older, there is deterioration. I mean, but there are things that you can do in terms of the skills you're learning, the social situations you put yourself in, getting the right balance. There's things that we can do to keep ourselves sharp. A lot of the memory strategies, right? You know, that stuff can keep your brain sharp. Yeah, and actually using things in the real world. However, there is deterioration as we get older. But so therefore, as you get older, it can be harder to shift a belief because you've had it for longer. All right. And now it's become reinforced. So now you got to find a way to kind of break that up. It's like the scaffolding, right? That goes, and now you got to knock that stuff down and then build something new. And now, okay, now you got a new belief. But what you will find, and I work with people in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I work with actors sometimes as well. And there's a lot of pressure when you step on stage. And I'm not saying that it's always easy for people, and we're all different. But there are usually always ways around it that you can make a shift. You know, so while age will have an impact, it's not impossible to change belief and see real world results.
How long is like if so I haven't done anything with memory other than like normal life stuff. But how long can someone expect it to take to see an actual impact in, you know, their day-to-day interactions? Let's talk business, like a business person. In remembering stuff, remembering conversations, somebody maybe commenting on that, I didn't realise you remembered that, or something like that. How long does it usually take?
Well, there's good news and bad news. Good news is a skill, so anyone can do it. And that's been my observation for 30 years. Anyone can do this. We all have different ways in because everyone's different. The bad news is it's a skill. So with any skill, it can take time to build up, and and making the leap to real world stuff. For most people, they never get there, which is why a lot of the strategies I teach, they never get adopted. They've been around for 2,000 years and they never actually get adopted. Whether that's in school and, you know, if you started in there, maybe we'd have different kind of thing going on, right? And so that's a challenge. However, my observation from the 90s, from the very first workshop I did, it was about 6 weeks. If people do a little bit of daily training, about 6 weeks, there's a shift. Now, I know nothing to back this up until the last 5 years, where there's been a lot of research on these specific techniques that I teach, memory palaces, etc. Boris Conrad, Martin Dressler, the couple of neuroscientists. Boris is also a world memory champion. And they were able to take 26 memory athletes and 26 people who had never done this stuff. And when you look at the activity with, let's say, someone who uses these strategies I use, more of your brain becomes active. When you memorize, you get higher levels of performance, higher levels of recall, you retain for longer. After just 6 weeks of training, about 20 minutes a day, the brains of the people who've never done it started to mirror that of the memory athletes. So in answer to the question, it's actually 6 weeks. That's actually how long it takes. However, for me, most people are never going to stick that out. So what I try and do is give people value in the first week. You know, what can we do today? If you were able to remember 3 things from a conversation, would that be valuable to you? And if someone goes, yes, and we could pick a different scenario, you know, but if they go, okay, let's start there. And let's do this one simple thing, and then we'll grow from there. Meanwhile, let's do a little bit of daily training. So now you build the skill, but you also get value immediately. And if you can do that, now people's motivation goes up, and then they will continue to do it.
So can we, because I'm keen to make sure we get time for this, because Arthur, I'm not sure if you were in the email chain.
Yeah, I was in the email chain, yeah.
So Mark, I sent you through an old invoice from the builder's merchant.
Yeah.
And, we thought we'd do like a live example of how someone like myself and Arthur, who have no abilities, skills, pre-trained things, and I purposely haven't looked at the list.
I haven't either. I kind of saw what it was about, and I was like, I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to look at it.
So take us through what, you know,
Okay.
how, you know, you've seen the list. Are we going to remember the list?
Yeah.
Tell me how you can demonstrate what a novice can do.
Okay, and so what I'd say is, what we'll do here, think of it as an experiment for yourself. So what you don't want to do is put pressure on yourself to go, I've got to remember a bunch of stuff, because you sent me 11 things, and it's 11 things, right? And what we'll try and do is get you to remember all 11. But what will be more interesting is, and obviously anyone watching and listening, they can give it a go. But what's more interesting is see how many you remember tomorrow or tonight, and then tomorrow. See how long it sticks. Because that, for me, is the real value of that stuff. It's like, wow, I did that once and it's in my head. Because usually, if you did this, someone might be able to remember that stuff with repetition, right? But that will fade. That is never going to stick. With this stuff, it's going to be stickier. And so the way this works is I'm going to we're basically going to stick pictures on different parts of your body. It sounds super weird, right? All you have to do is imagine what I say to you in your mind. Like nothing else. Don't try and remember. Just imagine what I say, and we'll just see what happens. We'll do it once. We'll see that you remember the pictures, and then I'll show you how to relate that back to the real information. Sound good?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so just imagine this. So imagine you've got some insulation, and I want you to wrap that insulation around your feet. Maybe it keeps your feet nice and warm and toasty, right? So you're wrapping insulation around your feet. Next, imagine you grab some plasterboard, and I want you to break it with your knees. So you got plasterboard, you break it in half with your knees. Can you see that? Boom, break the plasterboard. Yeah. Next one, a little bit strange. Imagine on your thighs, there's 2 gigantic rocks, and the rocks are covered in wool. Yeah, you got rocks covered in wool on your thighs. You know what that's kind of right. On your behind, and we're just going to use what you sent me here. There's 12 millimeters apply on your butt. And imagine maybe you sit on this 12 millimeters apply on your butt, on your behind, and it's stuck there. In fact, you can't get rid of it. You're walking around and it's on your butt. There's 12 millimeters apply. Next, imagine on your waist, someone hits you with a door. Boom. Boom, off your waist and bouncing off your stomach, your belly, or your six-pack. I don't know, whatever's going on there, right? Someone's bouncing a door off there. Next, imagine on your chest is a chicken. It's just a chicken. It's sitting there on your chest. Don't ask me why. It just is. There's a chicken on your chest. It's walking around now. Next, imagine around your neck is a mesh sheet. It's just a mesh sheet, and it's wrapped around your neck, and it's all wrapped around there. Okay, we're going to go into your face next. Now, imagine that you're biting into two trees with your mouth. You're biting into two trees, and you're obviously going to say timber, right? When you see yourself biting into these two trees. Stay with me. On your head is covered in plaster. So it's all over your hair. You got plaster all over your hair, and you take a bunch of screws, and you start screwing the screws into the plaster. And then on the ceiling, if you look up at the ceiling, what you can see is tons of foam, and it's expanding, literally expanding all over your ceiling. It's a mess up there. Expanding foam all over your ceiling. And then finally, if you look at your hands, in one hand, you have a bent strap, and in the other hand, you have another bent strap, and these are quite heavy. Okay, so we just did that once. No idea how many of this is going to stick. So let's go through. What we'll do is I'll say the part of the body. Tell me what you see. Tell me what you see. So what do you see in your feet?
It's insulation wrapped around my feet.
Insulation. Now, what will happen is this is 100 millimeters PIR insulation. So you don't need pictures for all the other stuff. And the thing is, if you memorize this, you use your common sense. You've got context. You know, you've seen, you've worked with these materials. So you say 100 millimeters PIR insulation. Great, okay. So now that gets connected, you literally form a memory. The picture triggers the real stuff. What do you see on your knees? Plasterboard. It's just plasterboard. There you go. What do you see on your thighs?
Rocks with wool.
Yeah, so what is that?
Rock wool.
Rock wool. It's rock wool. So you see the picture, it's rock wool, right? Okay. Now, you could just imagine rock wool, right? If that image is super clear, but, you know, I'm not in construction, so I imagine rock wool coming around it. And it was a bit more memorable. What do you see on your butt?
12 millimeter ply.
Yeah, 12 millimeter ply. Great. What's on your waist?
It's smashed with a door, right?
Yeah. And what is that? I don't even see the lid. So this is door liner. So you see the door, but what you say is, reminds me of door liner. And you know what door liner looks like. In fact, you could just be hitting yourself with door liner if you wanted to. You could adapt the image, and that's okay because a memory is pliable and flexible. What's on your chest?
Chicken.
Yeah. Now on the list is chicken wire. And you could just imagine chicken wire around your chest, but a chicken's probably a bit more memorable. So you see the chicken, but what you say is chicken wire. Boom. And now it gets locked in. What's around your neck?
Mesh or something,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's a mesh sheet, right? You got a mesh sheet. That's the next thing to buy. What do you see? What are you biting into?
Oh, the tree.
Yeah.
The timber.
Timber.
Timber. So it's 4 times 2 timber. So you don't need the 4. You can just say it out loud. Oh, because now your common sense will kick in. Because if you say, what do we need this for? How are we going to use it? So engage the brain. Your common sense kicks in. You go, we need 4 times 2 timber. Great. And you can think about what you need it for. That now makes it memorable. Meaning is crucial to all of this. It's not random crap we're sticking in our head. The images act as a trigger to remember the real stuff and think about the real application for it. What's on your head?
Plaster.
Yeah.
With the nails.
Yeah. Plasterboard screws. Okay.
Yeah.
Plasterboard screws. And what do you see in the ceiling?
Foam.
Yeah. And it's expanding, right? So it's expanding foam. You get some expanding foam. And finally, what are you holding in your hands?
Bent strap.
Bent straps. There you go. There's your shopping list.
It's pretty cool. So I guess there's some logic in working top the body, up the body as well. And it's one part of the technique to actually use your body as a place to transition out.
Yeah, so the body is just one example of a type of memory palace. Now, people will call this different names, right? But essentially, this goes back to the Greeks. And the idea is you could use items in your body. You could use items around your home. And these act as, let's call it a memory file, somewhere where you can store information. So your feet is a memory file, which means you can put the insulation to remind you on that part of your body. It taps into visual and spatial memory, but also because this is quite multi-sensory, it sticks And you could use a journey from here into town, for example, and use locations. Now, what you'll find is, and most people misunderstand what a memory palace really is. They think it's a memory tool. In my mind, it's not. I mean, yes, it helps you remember. It's a thinking tool. It helps you think more deeply. You create a mental map. In this case, it's 11 things you're going to buy, right? But then if you think about what you want to use it for, what does it mean? It helps you really, relate it to the real world. And, lists are pretty straightforward with it stuff. But then you can expand this technique and take it into building expertise, remembering what's been said in a conversation. If there's more advanced systems for numbers, which you can then use for statistics, sales, marketing, whatever it is. And you can also use it to remember more what you read, watch, and listen to.
Would you say that would be the same technique you would recommend for, say, names and faces? Because I think it goes a long way, especially if you can remember foreign names. I have this as well, where the way it's spelled is not the same as it would be pronounced in English. So I look it up and I really try to remember, okay, Marish or however the name is usually pronounced. Is there a different way that you would go about that?
Yeah. So essentially there's 5 steps to remember names. And the first one is creating the habit of paying attention. Most people kind of miss this out, which is why you forget the name. You weren't listening, you weren't paying attention. So you create the habit of paying attention. Immediately, you'll be 5 times better at remembering names. That's all you got to do. And what that's about is being interested in that person. It sounds like, a lot of people are interested, but sometimes we're thinking about our own stuff and we're not really paying attention. So that's going to go a long way to doing that. And the next thing, and you'll have heard this stuff before, you hear the name. If it's Marish, then so I want to say that name. Now, because I've been doing this a long time, I tend to have built up a vocabulary of pictures for names. Never tell people what your picture is, right? But for Marish, I might imagine someone getting married. So maybe I see a veil or something. But what I say is Marish. And it's important that I say that because what I want to connect is the sound in my head to what I actually say out loud with a picture. And there's context to this situation as well. This is where you've always got to bring your common sense into the room. It's not just about creating a bunch of pictures, right? There's no value in that. There is value when you go, what does that represent? Now, once we've had a conversation for a little while, I just know you now. And so this is where I've got to kind of repeat. If I don't revisit your name, I'll forget you. For Arthur, I just think of Dudley Moore and Arthur. So you've got a cocktail. Hey, all right. All right. Or maybe you create a little rhyme. And so that's how you can dial a memory up in the moment. But to remember people long term, the more you know about them, the more memorable they become.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely find because I'm not on flats anymore, but I'm doing a lot of grappling in jiu-jitsu, and it's quite embarrassing, really. I'm like rolling around with these guys every day, every other day, basically in a week, and I keep asking their names, and I always forget. And it's the same for them to me as well.
Yeah.
And I feel like I do actively want to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's the pressure that I'm putting on myself, why
Yeah.
I'm not. But then other people, like certain people, I will remember their name, and certain people I won't. I wonder whether can you dissect that anymore, or is that too vague for people?
This is really common, right? So what will happen is there's actually a lot of embarrassment connected with not remembering a person's name. So you preempt it by priming yourself by going, listen, I'm probably not going to remember your name. I'm crap at names. And they go, so am I. Great. Okay, your brain's done. Your brain's like, all right, okay. It doesn't matter what you do. It's not going to make that connection now. And so there's a little leap between how do you get a level of confidence that you can even run an experiment with it? And also letting go of failure, because people will go, can't do it. It's a failure. No, you just need to find, a little bit of practice and find the right way. Fail it 10 times, and then number 11 or 12, it might work. And don't try and do everything at once. Why don't you pick 3 people that you know and go, right, okay, if I was to create a picture, what would it be? What would be association? And then pick one person you've just met and go, all right, that one person I met today, maybe you write it down for yourself so that it's there. And then you play that out. After you start brushing your teeth, think about that person, create a picture. And so a lot of this stuff you can practice beforehand. And here's the little magic that happens. This actually starts to train your brain that, oh, this is important to you. Oh, okay, you actually want to do this stuff? Let me help you out here. And then you get better. And little things like using the name in conversation. Now, everyone's heard this, but there's a big difference between hearing something and really trying something out. And with names, you have to be willing to fail. And you have to be okay with forgetting someone's name, because it's always going to happen. But once you get good at it, you can remember 20 people in a room. Okay, but what's more valuable is me meeting you today, and next week, because I'm working with you, I remember who you are. At least what people say, that's what's way more valuable. Don't know what you're taking than that, but that's what I've seen.
I know it goes really far when you've got 50 guys working on site. Some of them you only see once a month, and you come up and you say hi, Mark, how are you, and all of that. It goes really far. So I think it's definitely a useful tip that you've given there.
I think sometimes there's like a bit of, I don't know if stigma, or there's something about like asking someone to repeat their name that people don't like doing, and people don't like. It's either they think that, oh, that person's going to feel bad because they have to repeat it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, from my point of view, I think it shows that you care, that you're like, no, I want to get this right. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to just be like, oh, just call me Bob, doesn't matter. And then I think that there might be an element of that in it as well when it comes to names on site and stuff. Yeah. It's like, oh, just call me that. It's just move on with it. And then you don't want to put them on the spot and keep going, no, tell me again.
Yeah. And that's probably not the first time that's happened, right?
Yeah.
For that person, it's like, oh, okay. And maybe there's a time aspect there. But I think there's a mindset to what you're describing there, which if you do remember a person's name, it's useful. Like, really sorry, I just didn't get your name. Can you just play out for me? Because you know what? I want to know your name. I want to use your name, right? Because my name is only fair. Yeah. And you play it out, and then they go, oh, okay. And if you don't get it, you go, look, this is me, but break it down for me. And then you get it. You go, oh, great. Well, I'm never going to forget you now. You're in there. Done.
Yeah, and as a former teacher, is really, powerful. A lot of kids, they never had a teacher that bothered to learn how to pronounce their name properly. Yeah. And then, I mean, I've also, having learned languages, I kind of know a bit more about different, cultures and languages and how they pronounce the names in that. So I might say the name as it actually is because I know, and they're really surprised. And they're like, well, why aren't you just calling me Luke when, my name is Lukash or whatever it is? Yeah. And it can go a long way, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to see it when I used to go into schools, and there'd be 20 or 30 students. And in that first 15, 20 minutes, I'd make it my one job to know everyone. But I used to see teachers that didn't know the people that were in the class, didn't know the students, didn't know some of the names, which for me was like, this is how you connect. Now, because I used to go in for a day, and some schools were, okay, they were probably like school I went to was pretty rough. And schools at the other end. And so you've always got level of crowd control, at least for a trainer going in for a day. And the quickest way I found to make connection and just get everyone honed in was to use their names. Arthur, what were you thinking there? Arthur, what's your take on this? And you go, oh. Right, now you're looking at me. You know me? We've just met. Yeah. What? Who is this guy? And it's just, so for me, names is about connection. What you understand about people, it's, memorizing names, okay, whatever. But being able to build deeper connections with people, well, that's valuable.
Mark, I wanted to ask you about one of the areas that Arthur and I focus on with builders is helping them get to-do lists off their head and into productivity tools or into platforms so that their teams can kind of help coordinate and help them do all of their tasks. Yeah. And it kind of, I was curious about how your take on these types of tools where you've got collaborative to-do list, and you've got things sort of essentially aimed at getting things out of the head, out of the kind of individual notebook, and more kind of cloud-based. And do you think that makes your memory worse? Do you think you can become over reliant on that, and then not very good at just remembering stuff on site? Or do you think that they complement each?
Yeah. So in terms of productivity, productivity is the other part of what I do. And there's 3 ingredients that I've seen up to the level of productivity. First one is clarity. Now, the fact is, I see most people, if they want to remember something, they'll write a handwritten note, and that has been proven to work better. Sprinkle some memory techniques, you'll ramp it up, you'll 10x it. But in terms of being able to organize, work collaboratively, I'll use something like Monday. I've got a little production company. And so if I bring a team of 10 or 12 people in, we'll be on Monday. But what we will do is our weekly sessions. The 3-month goal is understood. There's clarity. Every week, we're looking at what are the activities that will create impact. That's the second ingredient, not the busy work, the stuff that moves the needle towards the goal. And we know there'll be other to-do stuff, but you got to factor it in. And the third thing is accountability. And that's where either you're keeping yourself accountable, or as a team, you're going, right, okay, we're in this together. Every week, we're going to decide what this week is about. And every day as an individual, I'm going to prime myself, or we'll scrum it and we'll get together and go, okay, what's today? And then get anything outside of your head that you don't need right now. And so I use what's called I call it a focus board. And so at the beginning of every day, I know the one thing that is the most important thing. I know what this week is about. And so I'm a big fan of getting stuff out of your head. Right? And there is a need for that, because when you get the stuff out of your head you don't need right now, there is an increase in clarity, which means it's easier then to remember the really important stuff. Keep yourself on track. And that is massive in terms of productivity. At least that's what I've seen. I've run this with groups, I've run it with companies, and it's makes a big impact.
So if I understand that correctly, are you saying that although you do use tools, like you mentioned Monday, you are still advocating for getting stuff out of your head onto paper, onto a board, and then digitalizing it, rather than does that aid the memorization of that, as opposed to just like going straight onto your keyboard or onto your phone and just typing it into?
Yeah, so to aid the memorization, it's going to be more effective to write that down. But in terms of just managing workflow, workload, activities, I mean, everyone's remote, right? Or maybe you're not remote, you can make it, like, cloud is the way to go. But I think there's something about, as an individual, how am I keeping stuff in the head that is really important that I need to action? Maybe an example that I do every day is when I run a coaching session, I'll memorize the conversation, I'll play it back. When I get off, I grab my phone and I dictate everything. And then I chuck it into Perplexity, AI, and I've fed it some instructions about how to structure. It spits it out. That's my note. Now, do I need to remember that conversation for the next year? No, I don't need to do that, because actually my natural memory builds up a picture of who I'm working with. I will naturally start to remember something. If I want to refresh, memory doesn't stick forever. I will go into that note, I will refresh. And so there's no point in my mind trying to stick everything in your head. It's counterintuitive. It's going to actually slow you down rather than speed you up.
Yeah, would you say that actually by getting this stuff out of your head, you then, and I might be kind of like getting into realms of some pseudoscience, I'm just making this up, but are you essentially emptying your mind to give you more bandwidth to say, remember people's names, remember the conversation you're having with your site manager and things like that, because you're not also kind of in the background thinking about the 20 things on your to-do list? Is that kind of how it would work?
Yeah, so we've only got so much attention. Like our attention span is limited. And for me, that all comes down to your focus and attention. We have too many distractions. So if you're trying to remember everything, what you're creating is a distraction list in your head. That is not going to help.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm a big fan of take stuff out of your head. But the reality is, if you will know that stuff over time, what you know, you just end up knowing. But the things that you
Yeah.
have to action, be explicit. And you can memorize some of that stuff. You could put it on a palette. So you go, listen, I know what this 3 months is about. I could tell you right now. If I was to pitch my business, I could pitch that to you right now. And, you put this, but what you'll find is, and this is important about the memory palette strategy, it's a bridge, because over here, you don't know something. This bridge will accelerate the speed you can get it into your mind and understand it. Once you know it, it goes from your head into your body. You just know the stuff. But as much as possible, clear your mind. Use tech. I'm a big geek, right? So he's tech all over the place. Keep your mind clear. Reduce distractions. Practice focusing on one thing. I'm a big fan of 30-minute, deep work sessions. I mean, that won't be right, depending on what you do for a living, right? But, even if you think about your day, be clear on how you are chunking up your day, what you are using it for. And you feel less cluttered. You feel less distracted. And therefore you feel less anxious, because distraction creates anxiety.
Yeah.
Mark, I want to make sure we talk about what you're doing, building in public, which I absolutely love, memory school. So, tell us about this kind of building in public of your new business. Well, I guess is it new, or is it an iteration of something you've got existing? But I'd love to just know about what it is, but also how this plays a, what day you even in and all of that. Can you give us a bit of teaser on that?
It's a good question. Well, actually, you got it right. It's new in the sense that it's a new product, but actually it goes back to when I started in 1995. I used to run these seminars, 2 days. Day one, techniques. Day two, I'd have a free-for-all. I'd say, look, just turn up and we'll come up with a goal. And I'll get you to work in groups. You'll self-learn. You'll self-solve the problem. And I'll come in and facilitate. I'll kind of troubleshoot. And we'll see what happens. It worked amazingly. And this is how I started seeing results. Memory school is that. Now, over the years, I've worked with a lot of people one-to-one in training in companies, and I've like Guardian master classes. I work with Even Standard doing a thing. And I've got training coming up with those guys as well. But ultimately, I thought, you know what? It's about time I created something which I believe could scale. However, it has to be positioned differently and offer a different value from what's out there. Otherwise, what's the point, right? And in my mind, it's about improving your memory for real world, personal and professional development, because that's where that's where it really shows up. And so I thought, what's the best way for me to do this? That one, creates positive accountability. Two, gives me a lot of insights so I can decide whether I want to really pursue it. And so this is where I decide, you know what, I'm going to build it in public. And what that means is on LinkedIn, or you've seen it, every day I'm doing a little video post saying, this is what I've done today. Good, bad, ugly, whatever it is. This is what I've done. This is what I've achieved. I'm behind on my target. What will I do? And so I'm just playing that out. And I'm on day 23 today. It's day 23 today. So time is ticking. In fact, no, I'm not on day 24. See? 30 days. I give myself a 30-day window to launch the product. And we've known each other before, so I'm going through a customer discovery process. Now, what's been really interesting about building it in public is usually there can be a challenge to do customer discovery, to find people. It can be, you've experienced this, it can be a bit time consuming. That has not been my experience with this, because I'm building on public. I've done over 30 discovery calls so far. I've got more building up. I've got to switch it off. Like, I've got too many coming in for this. But what it does give me is a real clear indication of the type of characteristics of the people that are interested in this, with the goal of, it's mainly slanted towards professional development. And I'm finding out what they're using today, what's broken about what they use today, what job they really want to get done, and why do they want it. Now, what's interesting, from 90% of people, when I ask them about the future, if you could, in reality, 10x how good your memory is right now, learn effectively, keep it sharp, what would you achieve a year from now? What difference would that make for you? The practical things are actually quite different, but there's one common denominator I'm hearing time and time again, and it's confidence. And it's actually what I heard in that very first letter that came in from Hermione. people go, you know what? I'd feel a different level of confidence. I'd feel I can do whatever I want to do. I go, wow, okay, that's really interesting. And you hear that from 20 people back to back. You go, geez, okay. There's something there. And then people kind of light up a little bit when they talk about it. And so, building it in public has allowed me to go through that process more rapidly. It's allowed me to go, okay, what is memory school? And I'm aiming to launch at the weekend. I got a ton of stuff to do. I don't even know if this is possible, but I'm launching with, let's say, the MVP, which is a couple of playbooks, which look at, I call them the 7 meta strategies of memory, and also the 7 applications of memory. It's not very sexy, but it's practical, right? How do you use it stuff? And then it's got, let's say, a community which engage with each other. And I'm setting this up to be self-learning. I'm giving away 100 free spots for life. And people have asked me, why are you doing this? What are you getting from this? What's the catch, Mark? Well, there's no catch as such, but what I get is a ton of data. And what I get is when we go live and I start having people pay for it, is a party that is in full swing rather than an empty, a room that you walk into. And the last thing I'm doing with it is just doing these live sessions, because I know that what I really want to build up is case studies. So that, let's say you're in construction, there's someone already that's been in construction that's had your problems and they've started to solve it. They're a little bit further along than you are, because I know that modeling is the fastest way to learn. And that's, so seeing other people allows you then to interact and go, how do I do this? And it also means that, I will be there to facilitate, but this is not about me just going, hey, do this thing, right? It's about people learning from each other. So yeah, that's where we are. So there's a lot to do before I launch it, but
I was going to say, Mark, one thing I really liked when I saw that your post about your 100 slot, that, and I don't know if it was the exact wording, but you said basically something like, if you just join in and you're just like a tire. You said it in a much more nicer way, but you're just kicking tires and you're not going to participate. It's going to get kicked out after. I think you'll give them a heads up and then you're getting them out. So it's like, actually a cultured community, and you're trying to get people in that, but actually actively wants to learn, because I guess that's going to bring out everybody else on it. So have you still got some slots available?
Yeah, there is, and you're right. I people have to jump through a few little hoops to get in. Like they take a memory scorecard. That gives me an indication of where's the motivation, is what they really want to achieve. And then I'm having everyone jump on a call with me, because then they meet me as well. It doesn't feel like this faceless kind of thing. And then they jump in. So far, we've got, as of yesterday, there was 37 spots. So I've still got quite a few spots to give away. Now, I'm going to keep on giving it. I'm not going to, even when we go live, I won't go live properly paid until I give away 100 spots. So that's my plan. And where I am now, I think it looks likely I might go beyond the 100 days, but I've got a few different strategies I'm playing out now to see if I can accelerate. Because once we hit 100, I know that we're game on and we're ready to go. And then I'm going to switch the subscription on, and it'll end up being like $47 a month, But if you get a free spot, it's free for life. I'm never going to charge you, so you can just have it. And because I know people are motivated, great.
It's probably worth to clarifying, because particularly our kind of demographic of listenership don't come from like degrees and basically they've learned on site or learned through just doing. So when you talk about professional development and being focused, like where do people that come more from a trade-based, apprentice-based background, not a traditional kind of studied and stuff like that? Do they still fall into that professional development category?
They do in my mind. I mean, I've worked with like people in construction before, and I've got clients who are in construction and various things. So, but actually, it doesn't really matter what field you are. Like what I share goes across the board. I don't have a degree. I didn't go to university. I was an actor, right? Everything I've learned is self-taught. So I guess I've maybe got a little bit of bias the other way, if I'm really honest. But I've worked with PhDs and doctors, and I've worked with people right across the board. And people are people. It doesn't matter what you do, where you are. We all have the same anxieties. These kind of processes work for everyone. It's what's more. So anyone can come in if they have certain characteristics, which is more about, look, there's something you want to achieve. There's a level of motivation. And if you tick these boxes, then okay, great. Because what I'm interested in seeing is how far can we go with this? I want to build a community that is different from like a lot of the other stuff out there that is really focused on that end result. So if we get 10 people from construction in there, this is actually quite cool because now you got a little cohort within memory school, and you can be helping each other there. But you'll also learn from what you hear from other cohorts, which have nothing to do with your industry, because there'll be overlaps.
What's the best way that someone wants to jump on, take you off on one of those 100 slots? What's the best way to
So
apply?
I think the easiest way now is just to go to the memory school itself. So it's essentially school.com, SKOOL.com. So that's the school platform / memory school, spelled CHOOL, like the old way, memory school. That's it. So school.com / memory school. I can share a link with you. But if people go there, and then I can there's a bunch of other things they have to do before I let people in. And I'm going to let everyone in next week who's got a spot, but I can then direct people. So it's easier. Just go school.com / memory school. When you get there, you'll basically get connected to me. I'll give you a few instructions, then you're off.
Amazing. Cool. Well, thanks a lot, Mark. That was very, very interesting. And like most of our sessions, we come in with one intention, thinking, okay, this is what we're going to be told. And then I feel like with this one, I don't know after it's different, but it was the thinking and overthinking, which are probably the most powerful things for me. That seems like the basis of a lot of the bloggers.
It's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pleasure. I loved this. It's been great.